Mount Sinai is in northwest Saudi Arabia. It's in the land of Midian, just like the Bible says. Well, today's guests have spent a lot of time there. Jim and Penny Caldwell, and the Caldwells, well, what can I say? You guys have been on an adventure unlike any other I've ever heard about. And what I want to talk with you about today is something that I hardly dare to broach. It's a subject that I'm almost reluctant to bring up, but it's the subject of miracles. Mm-hmm. In your exploration of Sinai, you have personally experienced a number of, what can I call them? Sometimes nudgings, sometimes perceptions, sometimes I think outright miracles, as though God is trying to direct your footsteps. This place called Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, is really unique. Tell us about it. What's it like to be there? Imagine you're standing there right now. What are you going to be feeling and seeing and experiencing?
The place has become so utterly special to us. Literally, just as you were saying that, if I picture myself there for even 2 seconds, a sense of reverence and awe comes over me just immediately, just as in the first time that we were there and Jim's knees buckled out from under him. That feeling, that sensation, all these years later has never left us. And even when we go back and we watch our own video of the place, the video even has that sense of awe and wonder about it. Because the place is not open to the general public, we've had multiple incursions with what's called the Frontier Forces Police there. Mm-hmm. And this is really a desert Bedouin force. They live out there. The Bedouin tell them when people are in the vicinity of this mountain, and then they come out and investigate. And we've been interrogated numerous times and actually hauled off to these little desert outpost jails, as it were. Don't picture it as a jail with bars. It's not that kind of a thing. It's just they, at gunpoint, will lead you there, usually leaving the women in the car. Myself and my daughter Chelsea were always in the car, and they would take Jim and our son Lucas and sit them on a dirt floor with a coffee pot and interrogate them for 3 or 4 hours. When you say miracles, literally, those have happened to us. There's no other explanation for this. And we go into this both in the book and in the DVD into great detail, but series of events that have happened to us that have caused us to be let go from these interrogations are just astronomical. But one of the things, I have to just say a little bit about this because you brought up the miracles. On our first trip there into Egypt, we had an issue with the truck. And when I'm telling you in the middle of nowhere, we were in the middle of nowhere, and the truck, we would make coffee by boiling water by this little mechanism that you stick into the lighter, and it would make an element hot, boil water, and I could give him coffee because women are not allowed to drive in Arabia. So anyway, like
these trips were 18 to 20 hours.
20 hours
of
at a
straight
time.
Driving.
And we were using this little thing a lot to keep Jim going, and the little thing burned up the fuse and nearly set the whole dash of the car on fire. So we are sitting in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of nowhere. We had pulled off the side of the road needing a 20 amp fuse.
Now, the one that was in was a 10, and it kept blowing, and I said, well, now, we pulled over in what they call a Saudi rest area, which consists of a piece of asphalt with a garbage can. There's no facilities at all, ever anywhere in the kingdom.
Okay.
And we're there, and I make the statement as we're getting out of the car that in a prayer sense that, Lord, we need a 20 amp fuse. And I've already been through this several times. We don't have it. And so we break out of the vehicle, go our own ways, and do our thing. But Lucas wanders out in the desert maybe 50, 60 yards from any asphalt, and he comes back with something in his hand.
Out of
And
the
I'm saying,
sand.
Lucas, what do you have? And he says, Dad, I have a 20 amp fuse.
I'm not kidding. I'm not
And he
kidding.
hands it to
Now,
me.
Lucas
and
is-
listen,
Our son.
Your son.
our son, and Jim being the doubter that he is, says, oh, well, I'm sure it's blown. You know?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
Like he would find a 20 amp fuse at all.
No, he'd
And
throw
I
it
look at
away.
It's not blown. I plugged it in, the little coffee maker came on.
And away we went to
off
Egypt.
We went.
So from this story, I can only deduce
That's a little
that,
bitty
that
thing, but I
God
mean-
God knows how much Jim likes coffee.
Yeah.
What,
To stay awake driving
That
for
is the
20
truth.
hours, I have to have my coffee.
we're having fun with this, but story after miracle after miracle of this sort happens to you in that region. When I think of that region, and of course I've read books about that region over the last few years. I've seen some of your previous productions and so forth, and I always get the feeling that the Spirit of the Lord is in that place.
Yes.
He's never left. It's sort of his place. And we think of Saudi Arabia as kind of a deserted wasteland, but the way you tell it, in that location, it's very active. The Lord is sort of superintending the place. And I get that feeling when I read about your explorations.
It's its own little ecosystem there. You're talking about in the Sinai region
Yeah.
directly, where these two mountains are.
Right.
There is water. Number one, you have to have water for anything to survive, and there's evidence of, especially on the Sinai side, of waterfall that comes out of water that comes out of the mountain. So you have pools of water as you go through this area. The mountain is literally covered at the 4,000 to 5,000 foot range with fig trees. Isn't the fig tree significant in that is a tree that is talked about in Israel in
Sure.
a
It's
number
associated
of
with
occasions
Israel.
associated with Israel. And then above the 6,000 foot level, Jebel al-Lawz especially is covered with almond trees. And that's significant. Aaron's rod was made out of an almond rod.
And you
And
tell us that
budded and produced ripe almonds.
Jebel al-Lawz, or al-Luz, as you
Al-Luz,
say,
as the Bedouin pronounce it.
the mountain of almonds.
Yes.
It is the
Absolutely.
mountain of the
Well,
almonds.
you're
yeah.
talking now about figs. That's Israel.
That's right.
Symbolic of Israel.
It is.
Absolutely.
The almond branch, symbolic of the priesthood.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you managed I understand, to get yourself a couple of almond rods.
we do. We've got a couple of almond
we
rods.
Work, and let me tell you, that material is extremely hard. I cut some rods that were about 1.5 inches in diameter, and they were originally 6 feet long. We had to cut them down to get them on the flight to get back to our home. But that wood is incredibly dense, and we cut those 25 years ago. They are still with that deep purple, beautiful bark on those almond rods. Has never cracked. They're almost
They're
as if they're
beautiful.
perfectly preserved.
They're beautiful.
So you find things like this in your exploration that validate the Bible. Another thing was that cedar tree. Now, I'm talking about this DVD. It's called Exploring Arabia's Sinai. It's 4 hours of amazing photographs of the area, amazing motion pictures, getting into places you can't possibly go, and they got there. And also, the narrative is just laced with the hand of God. God propelling you from one place to another, and you look up later and discover, hey, he wanted us to go here, and here we are. And I get a feeling of the supernatural guidance of God when I watch this video.
Right. There were many times you brought up the cedar tree. There's a tremendous cedar tree.
I was blown away. I mean, this is a part of the DVD you gotta watch.
We were actually blown away because these are not, had cedar trees just been all around the region, dotted here and there over the mountains, we would have never turned aside to see this thing.
Right.
But there in the middle of nowhere is this massive cedar tree. It was a little bit up the mountain. We went up there to investigate it, and there are root systems that run along the ground, and there's a much smaller one up above this one, but
About
there
30
are,
feet away.
Yeah,
And then another
and then
one to
another one to the other side of it.
to
So
the
there's-
south of it,
there's
by
really
about 20 feet.
There's really 3 of them.
There's 3
They're
trees.
kind of hooked together by the root system. But you can actually see these things, and you can see that on the DVD. We have satellite imagery of this. You can see
But it
this
looks
thing, how
very,
big it is.
very, very old.
Gary, it's
Well, you know my
got to
hobby.
be.
Yeah, my
It's
hobby
got
is
to be.
in bonsai. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always collected the small trees. It's just something I was interested in since I've been was a teenager. And so I earlier I said fig trees at one level, almond trees at another, but I didn't mention cedar. So this was something that really stood out in the landscape to us. Cedar trees are unusual. And in my hobby, I saw cedar trees as bonsais 8 to 9 to 1,000 years old. They did some research at Niagara Falls where they did some boring on some cedar trees that are hanging out of crags, watered by mist, that are thousands of years old. They are only this big. And this tree had a trunk that was 8 feet across.
Yeah.
Had 7 major branches coming out of it that were larger than
Yeah.
my body diameter. I mean, they were just that huge.
And you make the point that most probably this tree was there when Moses was there.
Well, I believe absolutely.
it could
Okay,
be.
and it's growing.
Good size. I don't think it was a small tree.
Tell us where it's growing.
Exactly.
I mean, on
in-
which mountain and how far away from?
Incredibly, there's 2 mountains as we described at the beginning of our presentation. We talk about this variance between Sinai and Horeb.
Right.
And we were trying, at this point, we had made the climb to the top of Sinai. Now we're trying to climb to Horeb. So we ended up in the valley between.
Okay.
And as we're coming up, there's an escarpment. The wall falls straight off 4,000 feet. But it continues up both mountains. So we're at this escarpment, and this tree is sitting up that hill at the top of it.
By itself.
By itself. So we're drawn up to it. Now we
Yeah.
have to climb up about 200 or 300 feet in elevation to get up to it. Not straight up, but walk up. We could walk up to it. But it was so out of place. It's directly between the 2 mountains. It's like in the center of this area. And the way it's spread when you're walking up is you see all the branches as you're facing you as you're coming up to it. It is so large that I could literally lay down inside of the branches. And so we got video, we took pictures, and still to this day I'm in awe that could have survived where nothing else survived.
I'm going to jump ahead in the video. They show how that tree has 7 branches. And I'm thinking to myself, what a coincidence is this?
How about that?
Isn't that
Isn't that
amazing?
something?
And,
Isn't that
and
something?
the way you show it in the video, people can see that it really has a menorah shape.
It does.
And I think it was there the way you tell it in the days of Moses. And
We think it sure could have been.
it might be a very special bush.
Yes,
But
indeed.
you can't say that.
I know, you can't really say it.
It's
but-
on the far side of the desert, whether you say it's from the east or from the west. It
Yeah.
couldn't be more remote. And we had to climb for many, many hours to get to it. So it's definitely one of those places as Moses goes in looking or into the and watering, taking his flocks with him, and he comes to the far side of the desert. This is a perfect place for it.
Yep.
So you have Mount Horeb, you have Mount Sinai, you have a place of sacrifice, as we mentioned on our previous broadcast, where cattle can be brought into cattle chutes. There are the ashes of the remains of early sacrifices. There are all kinds of signs that the 12 tribes were there. The incidents that are described in the Bible are outlined in what you see when you get to the location. They've been all over it, around it, and through it. And I think by the grace of God, because not everybody can just walk in there and start shooting pictures. It's guarded. And you're telling me that the Arabs essentially understand what the place is. And they understand why some people would be curious about it. And they don't want people in there. Because I get the feeling they'd like to keep this place secret from the West.
Yes, and I think it's always been that way. It's almost as though they were set as the guardians of it. In a certain way, I guess we can thank them that it's preserved as well as it is because they haven't let, streams and streams of tour buses come up there and see it. So in a certain way, that's a good thing. We always hope and pray that someday the Saudis would open it up to the world for people to actually see what's there. But there's so much more that's there. There's a very ancient graveyard there that they also have fenced off, that could very well be where all of the ones who perished after worshiping the golden calf. This is a very remote area, and Bedouin populations for centuries wouldn't fill that up.
With standing tombstones.
With pillars standing as markers. Now, these don't have any inscriptions on them or anything, but they took rocks and
How
stood
many
them.
would you say?
Oh my goodness, it's
huge. It's a very, very size of a football field at least, and numerous
Well, it has to
graves.
be more than Bedouins. It would
Well,
have-
number one, the Bedouin grave is always in a shape of a crescent pointing towards Mecca. This is pre-Islam era for sure. Looking at the weathering on the stone, I would estimate easily back to 1500 BC, maybe 1200 BC, somewhere in that range. Just from the weathering, you say, well, there's no inscriptions on it. Well, that probably would have been something that they wouldn't do at that time. They wouldn't chisel anything on these graves, but they would mark the site because it would be profane for anyone to stumble into this area and possibly be contaminated by, stepping on a grave. So this site was well marked. These large standing stones that we see were indicators that this was a burial zone. And that's one of the questions that keeps coming to us, or it did before we started posting this graveyard, was that you can't have Mount Sinai, you can't have the site unless you have evidence of a massive
Of a mass
graveyard
grave,
in
yeah.
the vicinity. And the thing about that is also it couldn't be in the camp. It had to be away from the camp in an area that was remote that would not be traveled through. And this fits all of that narrative. I mean, everything that should be, it is.
Wow. And we're talking about Mount Sinai. And, it's interesting that Sinai in Arabia is mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah, place 425, absolutely.
It's matter-of-factly talked about. And yet, everybody puts Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, which is not Arabia.
That's right.
And I mentioned to you before we talked here that it may be that the time has not come for that place to be generally opened up, that the Lord has sort of kept a cover on it over the years. Although back in the days of Jesus and the apostles, I think it was probably known for what it is. That is, they had a historic record of it at that time, but sometime between Jesus and the apostles and today, it was sort of covered up.
Yeah, we think that there are connections between Jesus and the mountain, the Mount of Transfiguration. These things that are talked about, that they knew very well where this place was. Who shows up at the Mount of Transfiguration? None other than Moses and Elijah, the two people that would have been there at that site. And Jesus obviously would have been there in that present. But I mean, yeah, it is all throughout that time period. So what had happened? When did God put his hand over it to cover it? It would be, if it had been known, like in Egypt, at the traditional location, it would be a zoo.
Oh, it
There
There
would.
would be
big
nothing
tourist
left
trap.
recognizable.
That's right.
God protected this site. I have to give credit, and we always do, to the Saudis for protecting this site.
Yeah.
It's preserved as if Moses, I always say this, Cecil B. DeMille shot the movie there, and he left the set. Everything's still there.
Everything's
perfectly preserved.
It is.
I mean, how could that be? We're talking something that happened 3,500 years ago. When people see something in this country 200 years old, they go crazy.
Yeah.
It's like it's a fantastic ancient find. In comparison to 3,500 years, pretty amazing.
It is amazing. And now you're getting a feeling of what I was driving at a minute ago. There is something miraculous about that place. Jim and Penny Caldwell, starting way back in 1992, began a series of investigations of the region of Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb. They're absolutely certain that they have found the true location, complete with artifacts and structures that surround it, all of which remind us of stories we read in the Bible. And of course, there's the split rock. And you on the back of this particular production, Exploring Arabia's Sinai, you see a picture of the split rock. And it says Split Rock Research Foundation. You've named this foundation for that rock. Giant rock, standing up, and it's got a crack in it that goes all the way to the ground. How tall is that?
Probably about 60, 65 feet.
Yeah, we're the estimate is hard to know exactly, but with Leonard Moeller standing next to the rock, we were able to calculate the backside at about 50 feet. And it drops down on the front side being the west side, about an additional 10 feet. So total 60 feet, a huge stone, and would have been an incredible miracle for that thing to be split and water to gush forth. We're talking, as I've said before, everything about this place is larger than life. It's huge. You don't go see this, you don't climb the mountain in 4 hours like you can do it to Jerusalem. It takes days.
Yeah.
Each one of these expeditions that we made would be 4 to 6 days long. We would have to pack all of the water with us that we would need. We would be away from the vehicle in that environment. Very, very, not trying to dramatize it, but very dangerous for us to be out there. No 911 in Kingdom. No way to get help. We couldn't even tell people where we were going.
Yeah.
There was only 1 or 2 individuals that had a letter that described the place where we would be if we never came back.
Do you think of yourself as brave?
No, we were
foolhardy.
My first scripture that I memorized was trust in the Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
Amen.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, number 1. Lean not unto your own. Who am I to understand what's going on here? Acknowledge God in everything that you do. Acknowledge the Lord in everything, and that He will direct your path. And that's what I stood on every time. And we also have people that were praying with us and for us. They may not know the details of what we were doing, but they covered us with prayer, and we believe that there was angelic presence when we were out there.
There had to
covering us and surrounding us and holding the bullets back, if you want to say that.
And to get the true feeling of it, you really have to share the DVD. There's just no other way. And in this DVD, Jim and Penny have lots of time, 4 full hours, to narrate in detail. And by the way, it takes lots of detailed narration before you'll understand where they went, what they did, what they saw. And bit by bit, you're going to be blown away. That's all I can tell you. I was, you will be too. Now, let's get to the good part, because as you get to the end of this DVD, you find artifacts, and you find things that were carved on rocks.
Yes, indeed.
And the one that really, really gets to me is the footprints. Tell everybody about the footprints.
This is probably my favorite topic with regard to all of this. Right up there in the center of the land of Midian, what you find is all these amazing things around this mountain, but there's so much more than that. We didn't just explore right around that mountain. We went there 15 times, but numerous punches down into the deep desert in Arabia. There's a deep desert down in the lower quadrant called the Rub al-Khali. In Arabic, that simply means the empty quarter. But there's so much more on the Arabian Peninsula. And when we very first saw these footprints that you're talking about, we saw them around the area of the split rock. But in progressive years of traveling, we have seen them all around Arabia, and this has actually been ground-proof by others.
And they're just on flat rock, and they are sandal prints with a little notch where you would have
your toe. And 2 side pieces,
straps,
which would show the latchets. Now, that is specifically a sandal. That's not what some would call a Neolithic, foot tracing with the little toes. These are sandals that are marked on these rocks, and they are marked all around the Arabian Peninsula, and that's
a lot of country.
Yes, indeed.
Huge country it is, a third the size of the U.S., actually.
So for 40 years, they wandered not just in one little place, but all around what's called the Saudi Arabian Peninsula.
That's exactly right. It would be an astronomical coincidence to have a promise to a certain people as detailed in Deuteronomy 11:24, wherever you place the soles of your feet, I will give you the land. And here we have a peninsula that is covered with sandaled footprints, not feet with toes, sandals, specifically sandals. And if our good friend Dr. Kim, who also worked in Arabia, who he and his family went 12 times to this mountain, he could speak fluent Arabic, and the Bedouin literally told him, when he asked them, who put these here? They spoke by Arabic back to him, Yahud. And Yahud in Arabic means the Jewish people.
Wow.
They literally told him, the Jewish people put these here. So where do you go with that? When you have coupled with a biblical scripture that literally says, the promise is with the sandaled footprints. What the other thing that's kind of amazing about that, God also, it's marked very clearly, their clothing did not wear out for 40 years, and neither did their shoes. And I wonder, of course, that's the graciousness of God, but I wonder if it's not because they needed the soles of their feet to mark exactly where they had been, because at some point in the future, this was going to be found and discovered.
So 3,500 years later, what they engraved on the stone is still there.
Yes.
That's some kind of engraving. How does that work? I mean, what?
Well, in a desert environment where you don't have any erosion or corrosion
Hardly any
or
rain.
any weathering from the rain, these things last literally forever.
Yeah, they do.
And the petroglyphs on the rocks, the cow, bull petroglyphs, they have been there for multiple thousands of years. It is interesting too, is that in the Islamic term of erasing the signs, they only erase what they recognize. And what's happening is these signs are there that were not recognized, so they weren't destroyed. And again, I call them the chalkboards of history, because this writing is now starting to speak to us.
Jim and Penny Caldwell, what adventurers they are. And this 4-hour DVD is yours for only $34.95. 2 DVDs. I have been through all 4 hours and loved it. I'm telling you, you'll learn a lot. But more than that, you'll feel it right here. Suddenly you'll take a breath and say, wow, God is still working in the world.
Amen.
And that's just the amazing thing. Also the book, God of the Mountain, exploring Arabia's Sinai and God of the Mountain. $19.95 for the book, $34.95 for the DVD. And if you want what we always do here at Prophecy Watchers, a full package, we're also providing the Exodus case by Leonard Muller with pictures by the Caldwells, all through it, and Tim Mahoney's Patterns of Evidence on the Exodus, timing of Egyptian history, and all of these items, and you'll see them right there on your screen, together, $99.95, which is a considerable saving over buying them separately. We're calling it the God of the Exodus passage. Go to prophecywatchers.com, click on the online bookstore, scroll down, and you'll find them. Well, we have only seconds left. Jim and Penny Caldwell, it's been an experience for me. May the Lord bless you in your coming work.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much
and
for
thank
having
you
us.
so much for having
You
us.
are.
It's
Enjoyed
just
it.
been a
Really
pleasure.
a great time.
More than welcome. I'm Gary Stearman. It's been an adventure, and the adventure goes on. Keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody.